Hi, this is Katie, and today we're going to talk about accessible text on the web. This is accessible text, so is this, and so is this. This is not, this is not, this is also not accessible, nor this. So what makes text accessible? So one thing is that accessible text has sufficient color contrast. This means that your text color has enough color contrast with your background color. If your text color and your background colors are too close together and there's not enough contrast, this can be really hard to read, especially for people who may have visual impairments. So when we look at our examples, you can see that the ones that meet our accessibility criteria do have enough contrast with the background color. The ones that fail our accessibility requirements do not. For example, this yellow and white background is really hard to read, as well as this light blue text on a white background. There are also tools on the web called contrast checkers, and you can Google these or use the one that I've linked in our PowerPoint. And with these checkers, you'll put in your background color and your text color, and the checker will tell you if that combination is accessible or not. So if you're ever unsure if there's enough contrast between your text and your background color, I highly recommend using these tools. Accessible text is also appropriately sized. So if text is too small, like this example right here, this can be really hard for your viewers to read. Another tip is to avoid all caps, and the reason for this is because if someone is using a screen reader, which is a tool that's oftentimes used by people who are visually impaired to read out loud what's written on the screen, screen readers oftentimes will read all caps letter by letter. So they would read the word see, if it's written in all caps, as CEE, and that can be confusing for people who are using screen readers. It's also best to use plain fonts like Times New Roman, Arial, Aptos, etc., avoiding some of those fancier fonts that may be harder to read. Logical headings are also your friend. So headings are a good way to group content together thematically. This can be especially helpful for any readers or viewers who may be neurodivergent. And you also want to make sure to use the proper sequencing in your headings. So for example, if you have different levels of headings, make sure to start with your highest level, like heading 1, and then go to heading 2 and heading 3. The problem is that sometimes people will choose different heading levels because they like how they look. But if you are using a screen reader, it will jump around on the page in a way that's not logical if you use these headings out of their chronological order. And then finally, if you're linking to anything, accessible text best practices are that your links are descriptive. So for example, saying something like apply today, register for the career fair, those are better than click here. And again, the reason for this is because one of the reasons is that it goes back to screen readers. So again, if somebody is using a screen reader because of a visual impairment and they click on a link, if they click on that link, they don't really know where they're going. So it's always best to describe that link as much as possible in your text. So we're going to take a look at a few examples. So is this text accessible or not? Yes, this meets our accessibility check. There is enough contrast between the background color and the text color. The sizing is good. This is accessible. Now, what about this? Okay, so this would fail an accessibility check because we have this white text on a yellow background, and that's really hard to read. And this was something that I wrote in Microsoft Teams, and I actually didn't notice that the highlighting looked this way in dark mode. So that's always a good accessibility tip, is to check out how things look in dark mode, because some of your users might be using that and things might be inaccessible in dark mode that are not inaccessible elsewhere. Now, what about this one? Yep, this one meets our accessibility check. And what about this, finally? Right, so this text would not be accessible, again, because this link is not descriptive. We would want to make this link a little bit more descriptive. So saying something like apply here or register for the career fair. That way, when users click on this link, they have kind of an idea of where they are going. So those are some examples of accessible and inaccessible text.